Look at that. We have somebody. Hi, good afternoon, Arthur. As long as I have one person, I will get started because my attitude is that we have not a moment to lose. So I say dive right in with even one person. Now, what I'd like to ask you, Arthur, is two questions. One, are you studying for school test, state test, or both? And are there any particular subjects that you would like to cover? Oh, hello, Andrew. Same question for you. Are you studying for school test, state test, or both? And are there any particular subjects that you would like to cover today?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
No, I'm studying for the state test. I don't know what the school test is. What's
Well,
the,
according to state law, what you have to do is at the end of the course, you have to take a test from the school. And that's pretty easy because you just do it. It's like part of the course.
right,
And then you have to go downtown and take the state test.
right. So I guess I'm taking your course. So is that what test is that?
It's at the end of the class.
Well, I'm only 20% finished, so I'm
Okay.
taking what test is that then?
Well, it comes at the end of the class. It's an online course, so you take an online test at the end as well.
Okay, so it's the course test that I'm studying for right now.
Okay.
There's some additional things people can do before they take the New York State test. Is that correct?
Correct, but
Okay, now I see.
there's no law that says that you have to take it before you do the state test. Like you could do the
Right.
state test tomorrow if you wanted to.
Yeah. One question I'm going to ask, and then you could, move forward, I guess, with everything. So, when you pass the course test, how long is that good for before I have to get the license test, or else I have to retake the training, right? Is that
8 years.
correct? Oh, okay.
Yeah, eight
That's
years.
pretty good. It's that
Yeah, yeah. So that is pretty good. Now, let me ask you a question. What school are you attending?
the oh wait, the one yours, isn't it?
Well,
RELNI? RELNI, is that the one?
okay. Because
Why is there
I get
you have a few different things that you do, I guess.
I get confused because I teach at a few different schools. That's why.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I get confused, forgive me. But yeah, see, if you're taking an online course, then your test is online. The school where you're going, you get a choice. You can take the test online, or you can take it with paper and pencil in the physical school.
Well, the physical school is allowed. I'm in Los Angeles at the moment. So
Oh,
that's
okay.
another, that's why I asked you about the time limit, because I don't know how soon I can get back to New York.
Right.
If that, so now it makes sense altogether. So if I'm still here, I most likely will take the online test. I guess I have some proctoring process, etc. What I don't understand is if it's legal for people that live in New Jersey or Connecticut to get a New York State license, so how real estate license. So how do they do that if they have a license from out of state?
New York doesn't care where you live.
So, but you don't need a New York State license to register for the license test?
New York doesn't care where you live. New York cares where your broker is. So if you take the New York class and you pass the New York test, then you're going to get a New York license. And New York says that your New York license has to be with a brokerage in New York State.
Right. But
They don't care where you live.
no. But back up to register online with the Department of State's New York State exam,
Mhm.
you don't have to have let me back up. You don't have to have a New York State license, driver's license to register for that. Really, I thought that's so I didn't know that. So if I have to stay here for a while in California, I could still get a New York license, but I have to hook up with a broker in New York State.
Correct. Now, let me just qualify something. What's going to happen is when you get a New York State real estate license, they give you a little card with your picture.
Right.
And guess who produces the pictures? New York Department of Motor Vehicles. So you have to have your picture taken by Department of Motor Vehicles, but you do not have to get a New York State driver's license.
Well, that sounds like I'd have to go there in person to a DMV in New York State to get the picture, right?
Yeah, they have these little places where you can go to Department of Motor Vehicles and get your picture taken. They also have these little things called New York License Express. And you go there and it's like an ATM, and you go there and you stand
Yeah.
there and it snaps your picture.
Well, I'm sure whatever it is, it's not going to be easy as it sounds with the DMV. Nothing is easy
There's that.
in any state, in any state. All right.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, all right.
Yeah, Department of
Not a
Motor
problem.
Vehicles is never
So
fun.
that was it. That's my questions for now.
Okay. Okay.
So
So Andrew, tell me what's on your mind. You can unmute yourself and talk to us. If you if hey, if you don't want to unmute yourself or can't see how to do it, you can just type into the chat. What we're trying to figure out is what subjects we want to talk about tonight. And if nobody knows what you want to talk about, I will just, oh, I understand. You don't want to talk because you're at work. Okay, that's fine. Um, if you don't know what you want to talk about, then I'll just talk about stuff that I think is challenging that's on the test. So let me know what you're thinking. While you are thinking what you might want to talk about, let me just tell you how I work. You do not have to take notes. What I do is I put information and sample questions into the chat. And when our webinar is over this evening, I email the information, the notes. I email the notes to you so that you'll have them to study from. All right? So let's see if we can get started. One of the most important things that you will see on both, excuse me, one moment. Would you forgive me? This is the hospital calling me. Just one moment. This is Kristen. Excuse me. Uh, this is Kristen. I'm very well, but I'm a teacher and I'm teaching a class right now. So is it possible we could make this very quick? All day tomorrow. All day tomorrow. I don't have your number. Is it possible to email me your number? Thank you so much. Okay, very good. Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye. Okay, very good. I apologize for that. But you know, if it's a hospital, you take the number. I'm sorry, you take the call. All right, very good. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a subject that is always on the school test and the state test, any school that you go to. And that is the question of who does and does not need a real estate license. So let me see if I can find one of those questions for you. Which one of the following individuals would be exempt from the real estate licensing requirement? In other words, they can do real estate services, but they don't need a real estate license. So a tenant relocator, an attorney who does not sponsor salespersons, a property manager for several different owners, or a mortgage broker for mortgages other than residential. Mortgages other than residential would be commercial mortgages, wouldn't they? So what do you think is the answer? You can either call it out or you can type it into the chat, either one. And what I'm doing is I'm getting you a little list that will help you remember this. Okay, the answer is indeed B. And here I'm giving you a list of people who need and don't need licenses. Now, how do you book for the state test? Let me type that for you. Just a moment. Okay. Um, to register for state test, go to Department of State, eaccessny.gov. Register, whoops, my goodness. It says that it thinks that I have switched to speaking Spanish. Let me confirm on Zoom that indeed I am speaking English. I've never received that before. Okay, I'm speaking English. Maybe when I said eaccess.gov, that didn't sound like an English word to them. Register, username and password to create an account. Then you can reserve an exam date. Please allow at least 2 to 3 weeks lead time because they have a waiting list. Now, eAccess New York is also where you're going to go to get your exam results. So that's real important. And it's also very important to remember your username and password, because if you forget your password, changing your password is really a pain in their system. So please be sure to remember your username and password once you set it up. All right. Now, I'd like to go through with you the people who don't need a license, unless you tell me that you're absolutely perfectly crystal clear on that. All right. So interrupt me if you are perfectly crystal clear on this subject, because it's very important. It's on both the school test and the state test. So people who can legally do real estate services. What are real estate services? Real estate services would be things like offering properties for sale or rent, asking people to sell their property, collecting rent, things like that, advertising properties for sale or rent, uh, showing properties, negotiating properties, things like that. Now, unlocking a door is not considered um, a real estate service, but discussing the sale of the property, like negotiating prices and things like that, that would be considered a real estate service. So people who legally can do, oh, we have a few more people joining us. Hi. You're just in time. What we are talking about is the list of people who legally can do real estate services for payment, and they do not need a real estate license. This is on both every school test in New York State and also the state test, which is written by Department of State. So number one is attorneys. Attorneys are automatically real estate brokers. They do not need a real estate license unless they decide to open up a real estate brokerage and hire salespersons. Then they would have to get a real estate license. But let me give you an example. My sister is a lawyer. Okay, my father decided to sell his house. He got my sister to sell his house for him. She's a lawyer. Does she need a license to sell his house? No. If she decided to hire salespersons, then she would have to send $185 to Albany and get a real estate license. But as long as she doesn't hire salespersons, she can do real estate services all day long, doesn't need a license. Number two is building workers. So people like managers, building supers, on-site staff, they don't need to be licensed unless they do real estate services for more than one landlord. So if they go around the city selling and renting apartments for lots of different landlords, then they need a real estate license. But if they just work for one landlord, then they don't need a real estate license. Uh, People acting under a court order. So if a court appoints somebody, like it happens frequently in a will. Like for example, my will says that if I die, all the properties that I own are going to be sold by a friend of mine. He doesn't have a real estate license, but the court is going to appoint him to sell whatever properties I own at the time of my demise. So he's appointed by the court to do a real estate sale, even though he doesn't have a license. So number three is people appointed by a court to do real estate services. Number four is property owners. I mean, people can buy and sell property for themselves all day long. A landlord, if he owns a building, he doesn't need a real estate license to rent the apartments. He can do that all day long. He can do real estate services for himself. Number five, public officers. So government employees can handle evictions and sales and things like that if they want to. Tenant associations, co-ops and condos can do real estate services. Now, I want to emphasize that tenant relocators, let me write that, tenant relocators and auctioneers, real estate auctioneers, need a real estate license just as we do. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but we, salespersons and brokers, are allowed to do, we are allowed to do commercial mortgages. Commercial mortgages are, of course, non-residential mortgages. Now, why? We are not allowed to do residential mortgages because of consumer protection. Because Department of State feels that consumers, like ordinary people who are buying homes, really need to have experts with a mortgage license. And a mortgage license comes from Department of Financial Services. And that's on the test. Department of Financial Services is affectionately known as DFS. And people with that license can do any kind of mortgage, commercial or residential. Okay, now those of you who just joined us, what we're going through is who needs and who doesn't need a real estate license, because it is always, always on the school test and the state test. And so the way that I work, in case you haven't been with me before, is I put notes and sample questions that you are going to see on either the school test or the state test. And I put them in the chat so that you can see them now. At the end of the class, I print the chat and email it to you. So that way you don't have to take notes tonight. I'm going to take all the notes and I'm going to email the notes to you at the end of the class. So what I would like everybody to do right now, if you don't mind, is could you please give me your email address? And while everybody is giving me your email address, what I'm going to do is prepare the next subject for us to go over. Okay? And if you have any questions about the last subject we did, you're welcome to ask me. Oh, hello. Thank you. Hi, sweetie pie. My little dog just came home from her walk. Hey, sweetie, come on. Come on, sweetie pie. Come on, baby. Don't worry, I got you. I got you. There we go. Yes, you're very good. Good girl. Thanks. Okay, thank you for giving me your email addresses. Now, the next thing, oh dear, I must have moved. Thank you. I must have moved the computer while I was grabbing my dog. All right, the next thing that we're going to talk about is Sherman Act. Now, Sherman Act is a consumer protection law. It's a federal law, so it's for the whole country. And it is a consumer protection law. And the main question that you are going to see is regarding the Sherman Act is that we are not allowed to fix prices. All prices in the real estate industry that we charge to consumers have to be negotiable. All right, so let me give you the question that you're going to see on both the state test and probably your school test. In real estate, which is not prohibited by Sherman Act? Dual agency, group boycott, price fixing, or tie-in? What's the answer? Beautiful. Absolutely right. Hi, sweetheart. Okay, so dual agency is when you work for both seller and buyer, or, whoops, pardon me, buyer, or landlord and tenant at same time in same deal. It is legal in all states except 6. It is legal in New York State. The other things are violations of federal Sherman Act. It's actually called Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890. Um, Here's a question about another question about the Sherman Act. How are real estate commissions set? And I'm going to give you choices. Okay, how are real estate commissions set? Decided by state law, set by trade association, negotiated by salesperson, or negotiated by broker? What's the answer? Beautiful, very good. Answer is D. Okay, and the reason the answer is D is um, the first two, A and B, would be illegal price fixing, which is a violation of Sherman Act. And C is wrong because salespersons are not allowed to sign agency contracts or negotiate agency contracts with clients. Brokers sign contracts with clients. That's always on the test. They love that question. By the way, I found out something interesting recently that I didn't know. If you remember the Civil War or you remember the movie Gone with the Wind, General Sherman was the guy that marched through the South and like he burned like a 20-mile swath of the South. He like split the South in half by burning like a trail through the whole South. And that was General Sherman. So I'm going like, wow, I wonder if there's any connection between the famous General Sherman who destroyed the South and the Sherman Act. Turns out that the senator who passed the Sherman Act was the brother of the general. And the general was like a, destructive maniac. And the senator was like a peaceful guy who wanted to protect consumers. So they were two completely different personalities. But anyway, yeah, so the Sherman Act was a senator who was the brother of the notorious destructive general. Okay. Uh, so I guarantee the Sherman Act is on the test. Now, one thing that they try to do is on the test, they try to make you think that Sherman Act is related to fair housing. It has nothing to do with fair housing. It has to do with business. Now, one other thing I will mention before we leave the subject of the Sherman Act is that we are not allowed to even talk about commissions with other competing brokers. Because if we do, it could give the appearance that we're fixing prices. So it's funny because sometimes I get students who they get their license and they join a brokerage and they're out working in the industry and they email me and they say, Kristen, how much commission do you think I should charge? And I write them back and I say, when you were a student, I might be able to answer that question. But now that you have a license, it would be illegal for me to answer that question because that would be price fixing. I'm not allowed under the Sherman Act to talk about commissions with you because technically you are a competing company. You're competing with me. And competing companies are not allowed to discuss commission rates. Okay, now the people who have arrived, I'd like to ask you, do you have any particular subjects that you would like to talk about? Some people like to talk about math. Some people like to talk about fair housing because there are about 15 fair housing questions on the state test. So what is it that you would like, any subjects that you would like to talk about? I'm here for you. Some people like to talk about commercial. If you have nothing in particular that you'd like to talk about, then I will just go through what I think is important. Fair housing. All right. Uh, you will always get questions about uh, steering, blockbusting, and redlining. So let me see if I can give you those. And it's the same old classic ones that you will see on both the school test and the state test. Let me see if I can find them. I'm smiling because they're like the classic ones that have been there for years and years. All right. Refusing to make mortgage loans or issue insurance policies in specific areas without regard to the applicant's economic qualifications is known as. That's a little mannerism that they have on the state test. They don't say what is it or what's it called. They say what's it known as. All right. So it's known as steering, redlining, soliciting, or blockbusting. So refusing mortgages in specific areas, regardless of the people's financial qualifications, is redlining. That's right. Answer is redlining. Now, I had a student who said to me that he always got steering, blockbusting, and redlining mixed up. And he said, how do you remember it? And I said, well, it's pretty easy to remember because what these things are is they're based on movement. So like steering comes from steering a car. Like you jump in an Uber and you say to the guy, steer this Chinese guy to Chinatown, steer this Italian guy to Little Italy. So steering means moving, or it means directing a customer in a car to a neighborhood based on the customer's ethnic group. So if you can remember steering a car, like taking the Chinese guy to Chinatown, so that's pretty easy to remember. Redlining means that the banks used to put a map on the wall and draw red lines where they would not lend mortgages. Now, that's illegal because banks are supposed to decide on mortgages based on the finances of the loan applicant, not the neighborhood where they want to live. So if you can remember the red lines on the map, like, what the banks would do is they would draw the red lines in the minority neighborhoods. So they would say, like, they would put like a red line around Harlem and like a green line around the Upper East Side or something like that, which is like completely unfair. So that's what redlining is. And then blockbusting is like blowing up the neighborhood, destroying the neighborhood. So blockbusting is destroying a neighborhood by scaring people to sell for discrimination reasons. Like, one of the nice things about living in New York State is that, like, we have such nice neighborhoods. Like, I'm sure that where you live, it's kind of the same way I am. Like, I walk down the street and everybody knows my dog's name. And like, I know all the people in the drugstore and I know all the people in the laundromat, and I know all the people in the supermarket and everybody. I know all the people in the neighborhood. And if somebody came in and said, oh, like, you better sell. Like, told all my neighbors, you better sell because all the immigrants are moving in and it's going to be dangerous now. It would destroy the neighborhood. I wouldn't have any friends left and I wouldn't feel safe anymore because, like, all the neighbors know each other and we all protect each other and stuff like that. So it would destroy the neighborhood. It would bust up the block. So that's the way to remember it. All right, let's do some more because I'm sure that you remember this. Which one of the following is the illegal practice of trying to induce panic selling in a neighborhood because of the entry of a certain racial, religious, or ethnic group? Steering, antitrust. See, I told you they bring the Sherman Act in. Steering, antitrust, redlining, or blockbusting. Thank you, blockbusting. Channeling of home seekers to or away from certain neighborhoods because of race or national origin is known as which of the following? Steering, antitrust, redlining, or blockbusting? Exactly right. Channeling is another word for steering. Which is an example of redlining. Agents from two brokerages split a town into territories and work only in their territory. B, a bank refuses to make a mortgage loan on a property in a minority neighborhood. C, a buyer's agent shows his client homes only in neighborhoods that match the client's ethnic background. D, a seller refuses to accept a legitimate offer from someone of a different religious background. What's the answer? Which one is redlining? Yes, very good. Answer is B. So whenever you see bank, whenever you see a bank, you know it's redlining. I actually met a guy who was a mortgage broker, and he was kind of an older guy, and he actually had some antique maps from his bank, like back from the 1960s, that had the red lines on them. He actually had some antique maps from before it was outlawed. Couldn't believe it. Okay, now I think we've done the oh, nope, we still have some more steering, blockbusting, and redlining stuff. I'm going to do the steering, blockbusting, and redlining ones, and then I'm going to give you other stuff. A licensee attempts to get listings by telling homeowners in a neighborhood that their property values will decline when a group of immigrants moves in. The licensee could be found guilty of blockbusting, boycotting. Oh, I think I gave the answer away. How did that happen? I think I have it in bold in my notes here. So it's blockbusting, isn't it? He's trying to scare people to sell, isn't he? I better fix that. I better fix that to get rid of the bold. Now, I allowed my license to lapse during the pandemic. And so I allowed it to lapse for more than 2 years. And if you allow your license to lapse for more than 2 years, you have to take the test again. So I was thrilled that I took the test again because I got to go and see what was on the test. So I'm going to give you a question that was on my test in February of 2024. And how do I know? Because what I did is I ran out of the test and I ran out of the test. I had a notebook with me and I wrote down as fast as I could, like every single question that I could remember. Okay, so this is the one that I remembered from the test. Santiago is a broker who shows homes to Latino buyers in mostly Latino areas. This is steering, blockbusting, redlining, or filtering. What's the answer? It's steering. Absolutely right. Okay. Now, I'm going to give you some questions about some other things having to do with fair housing. So not just steering, blockbusting, and redlining. If homeowners in a certain area have been subject to repeated and intense solicitation by real estate licensees, so they've been subject to blockbusting, okay? Department of State can establish an order of protection, cease and desist zone, injunction, or D, writ of habeas corpus. What's the answer? Yes, answer is cease and desist zone. Absolutely right. Um, answer is B. Department of State can declare a cease and desist zone and issue a non-solicitation order. And what that means is that we aren't allowed to go and try to get business from homeowners in certain areas. Like if it's a cease and desist zone, we're not allowed to go there and try to convince owners to sell. Now, what we mean by that is not just go there and talk to the people or knock on doors or something. We're not allowed to communicate with them in any way. Like we can't do robocalls or email blasts or direct mail or flyers or anything like that if it's a cease and desist zone. And you know where there's a whole lot of cease and desist zones right now? The Bronx, because the Bronx is really hot. And it isn't really a cease and desist zone necessarily because blockbusting is taking place. The people are being harassed in the Bronx for sure. The homeowners are being harassed in the Bronx for sure to sell, but it isn't so much necessarily because of discrimination. It's more just for financial reasons because the Bronx is really hot. And like builders are trying to buy up as much real estate in the Bronx as they can to build new apartment buildings and stuff. So there's a lot of cease and desist zones in the Bronx so that homeowners in the Bronx won't be harassed anymore. And you can find out where the cease and desist zones are. They're on the Department of State website. Okay. Uh, I'm going to stop my little self. Are people enjoying going over this fair housing stuff? Is this useful? Okay. Okay. Because when I took the test last year, I counted how many fair housing questions there were. There were 15. Department of State is really hung up on fair housing. It's like a very big deal to them in recent years. Okay. How many questions on the test? When I took it, there were still 75, but it's possible that they might have added a couple of questions. I think they might have added a question asking, here, I'll type it for everybody so that they will know. I believe they may have added one uh, or two questions asking the definition of implicit bias. And implicit bias is unconscious bias for or against certain groups of people that we don't know we have. Okay. But as I say, when I took the test, there were no questions about implicit bias or cultural competence. I think it's possible they might have added one or two of them now. Okay. I'm going to go through some of these fair housing laws with you. Okay, here's a question that is always on the test. Civil Rights Act of 1866 prohibits discrimination in housing based on race, gender, religion, or national origin. What's the answer? Exactly right. Now, that one's easy to remember because the Civil War ended in 1865. And smack in the middle of the Civil War, what did Abraham Lincoln do? He stood up and he freed the slaves. So, right after the Civil War, and this is kind of interesting, like I didn't know this until I studied it, but the Civil War ended in April of 1865, and Lincoln lived for 6 days after the Civil War ended. So Lincoln freed the slaves, then the Civil War ended, and we didn't get our first real estate law, Civil Rights Act, until a year later, 1866, when we had the Civil Rights Act. And that gave everybody equal rights in real property and personal property, regardless of race or previous condition of servitude, meaning that they were forced to work. Okay. Uh, Here is a question that they will always ask you on the test, and I think it's pretty easy. What was the first fair housing law in America? I'm not even going to give you choices. Just tell me what it was. What was the first fair housing law? I mean, we just spoke about it with Lincoln and everything. Exactly right. Exactly right. It has to be 1866 Civil Rights Act. By the way, when I send you the notes tonight, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out all the spoilers. So I'm going to give you the questions, but I'm going to leave a blank after the questions, and then you'll see my answer underneath. So that like um if you don't want to see the spoiler answers, you can just like see the question and cover up the answer and guess at it yourself. All right. Now, I'm going to give you a question that is always, always, did I say always on the test? I don't know why they love this question so much, but they do. Familial status and persons with disabilities became protected classes under which one of the following laws? 1866 Civil Rights Act, 1964 Civil Rights Act, which, by the way, had nothing to do with housing. Federal Fair Housing Amendments of 1988, or Housing and Community Development Act of 1974? Thank you. 1988. Very good. Uh, does anybody know my silly way to remember that? Okay, I'm going to tell you my silly way to remember that. In 1988, two groups were protected by federal Fair Housing Act. And those two new groups were disabled people, right? And family status. Now, family status is not marriage. It is kids. So in other words, a landlord couldn't say to somebody like, you can't live here because you have too many kids or you don't have enough kids or something like that. All right. So the way that I remember it is this. Disabled people, wheelchairs, little kids, strollers. 1988. Looks like wheels. So 1988, right? So if you can remember the wheelchairs and the strollers, 1988 looks like wheels. You can remember the disabled people and the little kids. Okay. And it's so funny because, like, I've been teaching for a long time, and for years I had so much trouble getting students to remember this law. And after I came up with the wheelchairs and the strollers, everybody started getting this question right. I guarantee this question is on both your school test and your state test, regardless of which school you go to. It's like every school in the state asks this question. Now, here's the same question asked in a different way. Persons with disabilities became a protected class under which of the following laws? Civil Rights Act of 1866, Civil Rights Act of 1964, Civil Rights, I'm sorry, Federal Fair Housing Amendments Act of 1988, and Housing and Community Development Act of 1974. Oh, wait a second. That's the same question, isn't it? Is that the same question I just gave? No, it's a different question. Because they ask you the same question all different ways. I don't know why. They just love, love, love this question so much. So yes, answer is C. Okay. Now I'm going to give you a question that I actually got wrong, but maybe you're smarter than I am. Maybe you'll get this one right. Which one of the following laws was the first attempt by the federal government to guarantee equal borrowing opportunities to all United States citizens? Civil Rights Act of 1866, Real Estate Law of 1922. You know what that is? That's Article 12A. Article 12A is license law, and we started having real estate licenses in our state in 1922. So Real Estate Law of 1922 is Article 12A, which is license law. Federal Fair Housing Act of 1968 or Real Estate Settlement and Procedures Act of 1975. That has that's Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act that has to do with mortgages. Thank you. You are smarter than I am. I guessed A. I guessed Civil Rights Act. The reason I guessed Civil Rights Act was because 1866 Civil Rights Act gives people like the right to do like every possible thing that you can do with real estate. But you know what? It doesn't mention banks. They don't mention banks till 1968. So very, very good. I'm impressed. Okay, that's excellent. Answer is 1968. Um, the federal law does not mention banks in fair housing till 1968. Very good. All right. Oh, here's a good one. This question has to do with 1866 Civil Rights Act. Which law provides an exception that permits discrimination based on race? Fair Housing Act, local laws, New York State human rights law, or no freaking law? You can tell I'm joking. Thank you. No freaking law. Okay, so there are no exceptions or exemptions ever for 1866 Civil Rights Act for race. Okay. I think we're getting to the end of the fair housing questions. I think we have like a couple more. A landlord tells Pam not to rent to minorities. What should Pam do? Not take the listing since she and her broker could be liable for violating fair housing laws. Take the listing and hope that no minorities make an offer. Take the listing and keep the ethnic background of any potential buyer a secret. Well, I thought it was a rental, whatever. Take the listing and obey her client's orders. What's the answer? A. Okay, now my personal opinion, I mean, they don't care what I think. All right. But my personal opinion is that she doesn't have to refuse the listing. She can just say to the landlord or the seller or whatever, uh, we can't do that. It's illegal. And as long as nobody's breaking the law, she can go forward with the sale or the rental. I don't think she has to sacrifice the commission. She doesn't have to sacrifice the deal. As long as she makes sure that nobody's breaking the law, she can go forward. So I wouldn't necessarily say that, but of the choices that she has here, obviously A is definitely the best choice. But do you see my point? Okay, now I want to stop my little self. I think one or two people might have come in after I asked everyone to give your email address. And the reason I ask for the email address is so that I can email the class notes to everyone when we're done tonight. So if you didn't give me your email address already, please do so now. And I've already saved the chat because you never know when, somebody could be disconnected. You just never know. Now, I have a silly question for you. I think it's unethical for teachers to watch the clock. You don't want to be with a teacher who's watching the clock. So I just looked at the clock for the first time just now, and I noticed that the time is 7:07. How long is this class supposed to go? Is this class supposed to go to 7 or to 7:30? If you stick with me, I'll go to 7:30. Do you want to stick with me? If you have to go, you can go and I'll still mail you the transcript. Okay. It should be to 7. I'll give you a bonus half hour. I'm having a good time with you. All right? So we'll keep going. And if you have to go, like, so, some people have to make dinner or something like that, so I understand. Um, but if you have to go, you have to go, but you don't have to worry because I will still email the full transcript to you, so you'll still get the benefit. Okay? But let's go to 7:30 because I think we're on a roll. All right? So let's see what we can do. I'm going to finish out fair housing and then we'll go to a different subject. A disabled tenant needs to install a wider door to fit a wheelchair. What must the landlord do? And here are your choices. The landlord may refuse to allow any renovations of his property, must allow the tenant to make the renovation at her own expense, must make the renovation at his own expense, must make the renovation though he can add the cost to the rent. What's the answer? Oh, very good. You people have got it going on today. The answer is B. Um, according to Fair Housing Act, landlord must allow tenant to make reasonable accommodations, uh, also called modifications, at their own expense. And tenant has to remove the modifications at their expense when they move out. Okay? Interestingly, by the way, that's what a service dog is. Like an assistance animal is considered to be a reasonable modification. So, like, the landlord doesn't pay for the service dog or their food or anything. The tenant pays for it. Okay, now I want to point something out. On the test, they will never ask you about local laws because they're not going to ask people in New York City, what are the laws in Buffalo? And they're not going to ask some guy in Buffalo, what are the laws in New York City? Like that would be dopey, right? But what they do, well, I'll show you what they do. This is a question that has been on the state test for decades. You are expected to know which groups are covered by federal law and which groups are covered by state law, all right? Which protected class is not covered by New York state law, but may be covered by a specific municipality? Age, lawful occupation, marital status, or sexual orientation. So in order to answer this, you have to know which three groups are covered by the state and which one is not covered by the state. So which one of these is not covered by the state? Very good. Very good. Lawful occupation is covered by New York City and some other cities in our state as well, but it's not covered by the state. Okay. Age, marriage, and sexual orientation, pardon me. Sexual orientation are, well, I'm going to say have been covered by New York State for decades, many decades. Lawful job is not yet covered by the state. Okay, so very good. Okay, so we did fair housing. All right, let me see what else we can do. Okay, I want to give you one here that is always, always, always on both school and state. I want to be sure that I give you the questions that are just always, always on the test because that assures that you can do well on both school and state test, regardless of which school you go to. An appraisal could be defined as a homeowner's preferred listing price, a real estate broker's estimate of a property's market worth, an attorney's legal determination of equity in the land, or an unbiased opinion of value based on factual data. What's the answer? Exactly right. Exactly right. Answer is an opinion of value based on facts written by a licensed appraiser. Here's a question that they love on the test, and I'm going to give it to you because I think that it's confusing because it's poorly written. I'll show you what I mean. According to New York state law, a comparative market analysis, CMA, can never be referred to as a contract, an appraisal, a valuation, or a bill of sale. What's the answer? Well, you see, the problem is that Arthur is absolutely 100% right, but it's not the answer they're looking for. That's why I wanted to show you this question because I hate this question. The answer they are looking for is B. Now, a comparative market analysis is a table that a salesperson or a broker makes to figure out, like if you said to me, how much is this building worth? I would say, well, how much did the building next door sell for? How much did the building across the street sell for? Like, I'm going to compare it to similar properties that sold recently nearby, right? So it's definitely a valuation, okay? But I can't call it an appraisal because the person who did the valuation is not a licensed appraiser, okay? So the answer that Department of State is looking for is appraisal. It can never be called an appraisal because the person doing it is not an appraiser. But it's not a contract. So A would be correct. A CMA can never be called a contract because it's not a contract. And D is correct. It could never be called a bill of sale because it's not a bill of sale. So there's three right answers to this question. That's why I wanted to show you this, because this is a very faulty question. But like, I could tell Department of State, but I don't think they care what I think. So I just wanted to alert you that the answer they are looking for is B. The point they're trying to make here is that a CMA and an appraisal are both valuations, but a CMA can never be called an appraisal. So please don't hate me. I'm just the messenger. All right. I want to do this one. And the reason I want to do this one is that it's something that like students and teachers don't really notice. And yet it's on the state test. What is the combining of two or more adjacent parcels of land into one large lot, increasing value, known as plottage, contribution, capitalization, or reconciliation? Question mark is a good answer. Well, I'm glad I did this because like I wouldn't know this either unless it were told to me. And the answer is plottage. Okay, now I'm going to give you an example, okay? So first I'll give you a rural example, then I'll give you an urban example, okay? Now, let's say that Sam and Pam own land next to each other. And Sam's land is worth $100,000 and Pam's land is worth $100,000. Okay? Some guy from Pennsylvania comes and buys Sam's land and Pam's land, puts them together. Okay, so he paid 100,000 for Sam's land, 100,000 for Pam's land. He combines them into one lot and sells them for 300,000. That's called plottage. Okay, so it's exactly what he did. He combined two adjacent parcels into one large lot, which increased the value. And that's known as plottage. Okay, so I'm going to give you a real life example of what happened. Tyra Banks, you know, the supermodel, she bought 4 apartments. Okay, 2 of them were on one floor and 2 of them were on the floor above. And she knocked out the floors and the walls and made them into one big, huge apartment. She bought them for 17 million, all 4 apartments. She sold them for 50 million, 50. So that's kind of like the urban version of plottage. She turned them into like this New York City palace. Okay, so that would be like the urban version of plottage. Okay, so that one's on the test. And like I said, you know, the teachers forget to teach about this, and so the students never really learn it, but it's on the test. You'll see it on the test, and I hope you'll think of me. All right, let's see what else we got. Here's a trick question. I got tricked by it. Let's see if you get tricked. Sam manages a residential building. Whoops. Sam manages a residential building. He must ensure that each unit has, and here are your choices: access to laundry, heat from October 31 to April 30, an operational carbon monoxide detector, or working appliances. What's the answer? You're going to hate me. Thank you, Latika. Latika's got it right. Okay. Now, I guessed B also, and I got it wrong. Okay. It's a trick. This is a trick. The heat would be right, except the dates are wrong. New York State multiple dwelling law says landlord must give heat October 1 to May 31. So isn't that a cheap trick? Okay. And yeah, it has to have the carbon monoxide detector. Now, just so you know, this is a very poorly written question because working appliances is true too. Because, like, pretend you move into an apartment, okay, and the apartment has a refrigerator and a dishwasher and a stove and a microwave, okay? If you move in and it has a microwave and the microwave breaks, then the landlord has to replace the microwave. If you move in and it doesn't have a microwave, then the landlord doesn't have to give you one. If you move in and I said that it had a refrigerator, a dishwasher, a microwave, and a stove, I didn't say that it had a washing machine. Landlord doesn't have to give you a washing machine. See what I'm saying? So whatever, when you move in, whatever appliances are there, the landlord has to keep them there and they have to be working. So working appliances is actually true. Whatever appliances are there have to be working. Okay. Oh, here's one. Here's another one I don't like. This is from the state test. Where is asbestos typically found in a home? Oh, let me do that. That's hard to read. Let me make sure that the A's and B's are in there. I'm going to fix it to put the A's and B's in. Ah, much better. Where is asbestos typically found in a home? In stucco wall covering, around pipes and furnaces, within blown-in insulation, or inside old radiators. Very good. I'm impressed because I struggled with this one because I would say like all of these. Like they used to put asbestos like everywhere. But the answer is indeed the pipes and furnaces. Okay? Because although asbestos was used all over the place for fire prevention, the place it would be most likely to be found is near fire. A furnace is a steel box in the basement with fire inside. So furnace is definitely the best choice. Well, I couldn't fool you. Fooled me, but I couldn't fool you. Which chemical substance commonly used as refrigerant threatens the ozone layer of the atmosphere? PCB, CFC, CPS1, or CCR? What's the answer? Very good. CFC is a gas that leaks out of air conditioners and refrigerators and goes up into the air and destroys the ozone layer, which protects us from getting fried by the sun. CPS 1 and CCR are documents for co-ops and condos. Very good. All right. I just looked at the time. It's 7:31, so I see I'm losing more and more people minute by minute. So I guess it's time for us to knock off. Before we go, does anybody have any questions or remarks for me? All right. Well, silence is golden. Well, actually, I was gonna give you my email address, but you'll have my email address when I send you the material this evening. So give me a little time because I have to edit this for you. So give me a little time to get it out. And if you don't mind, I'd like you to say goodnight to my little dog here. Here she is. That's my sleeping beauty. That's my Bony Maroni. All right, so thank you, everybody, and you're welcome. You're welcome to contact me if you have any remarks or questions or anything, okay? So thank you, everyone. Good night.